Dr. David Morrison is the director of the Carl Sagan Center for the Study of Life in the Universe at the SETI Institute and is the senior scientist at the NASA Lunar Science Institute. Dr. Morrison is one of the founders of the multidisciplinary field of astrobiology, and he's also an authority on asteroids and asteroid impact hazards. He's written extensively about the struggle against pseudoscience on such topics as the denial of evolution and global warming. And today he's one of the most outspoken scientists exposing the hoax of Doomsday 2012.
Thanks for coming. I am afraid of December 2012 for the reason that Andy just so clearly stated, that if you look around you in a typical group, 1 out of 10 of the people sitting next to you believes the world will end on December 21st, which suggests to me a certain instability that could put us all a bit at risk. But let me first step back and point to this slide, which you in the front rows can read, about cosmophobia. I got into this field because I answered questions from the public sent to NASA's Ask an Astrobiologist website. About 5 years ago, I began to get questions that have steadily risen about fear not just of 2012 doomsday, but of all manner of astronomical things. When I was a kid, if I would read about a new discovery, a new comet, some event on the sun, I'd say, gee, that's cool, that's great. There clearly are significant numbers of people, especially young people, who today, when they read about anything in astronomy, immediately ask, is this going to hurt me? And that's true of every one of the things up there. How many people do you know who say they can't sleep at night because they worry about bagel shoes? Or think that with the prediction that the Andromeda Galaxy will crash into our own in 2 billion years, would ask, as many people have to be, will it hurt me? It's a strange phenomenon, and I coined this term, cosmophobia, fear of the universe, fear of the unknown. And I'm very interested in the feedback we might get on that. Today, the most common fear expressed to me is Doomsday 2012. The second most common, and I get several questions every day, are about the sun. There is a fear of the sun abroad in the land from people who think that at this solar maximum, we are going to have the greatest explosions in solar history, and they're going to wipe out our civilization, have no electricity for 10 years, and so on. But that's another story. Let me talk a little bit about the background from my perspective on Doomsday 2012. There are several threads in this. The Mayan prediction is probably the most frequent, and others will talk about that here. There's also a major issue of statements that the Sumerians of Mesopotamia, 5,000 years ago, predicted the end of the world in 2012 due to a rogue planet called Nibiru that is supposed to collide with the Earth. They weren't so clear about the date, but they certainly were clear about this catastrophe, and went on to say that there was a race of aliens living on this planet, and they came to Earth 7,200 years ago and brought civilization to the Sumerians. I say they say this, well, of course they didn't. But there is a gentleman, an economist named Sitkin, who started in the 70s writing ancient astronaut-type books about this. And that is a major thread, fear of Nibiru, of a rogue planet that is going to come and crash into the Earth on December 21st. Another thread has to do with astronomical alignments, something that I guess goes back to our astrology traditions. That the planets are going to be aligned on December 21st, and obviously, if the planets are aligned, their gravity will work together and produce some horrible change on Earth, the most common being a pole shift. I could go on with this. There are others. There's the question of somehow on December 21st, the sun is going to be between us and the center of the galaxy, which will focus the rays from the black hole at the center of the galaxy on the Earth and destroy it. In fact, nearly the same thing happens in the same configuration every year. Doesn't seem to bother them. It's very complicated, and these patterns all interact. The questions I get are sometimes quite bizarre. The question of alignments especially gets to me, because people are convinced that planets exert an influence on the Earth, probably gravitational, and if they were lined up, that would be awful. Now, the simple fact is there's no planetary alignment in December of this year. That's a complete fiction. But one of the things that they think is going to happen is a pole shift. Not a change of the magnetic poles, but an actual shift in the rotational axis. And constantly I get questions from people who see this happening. Did you know that the sun rose 2 days earlier this year in Greenland than it ever has before? People will write to me and say that they lived in the same house for 13 years. They've been watching the sun rise and set. It's now setting in a different place from it ever has before. There are all these empirical things, and anybody who has an idea like this can put it on the web. There are all sorts of mysterious things in the sky people are worried about. There's the second sun. Did you all know there was a second sun in the sky? Well, it could only be seen from China. And so they say 1 billion Chinese saw the second sun. Well, it turns out, if you trace it, it is a single photograph, probably taken through a double pane of glass, from a minor television station in an island off the coast of Taiwan. And that is the total source of the information about the second sun. People are challenged by geometry, too. There's one thread on this incoming planet Nibiru that says it can only be seen from the Antarctic, since it's south of us. Those of you who will think about the geometry may find that a little weird. Recently, I have received messages saying that no, Nibiru can be seen only from the North Pole, and the people of the North Pole are reporting it. These two ideas are simultaneously on the internet. That Nibiru is over the North Pole, and Nibiru is over the South Pole, and none of the rest of us can see it. There have been predictions of all sorts, and others on this panel will talk about them. My real reason for being here and wanting to have a discussion with you, especially those of you who are teachers, is how do we deal with this, especially from children. I have had numerous kids who at least self-identify as being 11, 12, or 13 years old who say they are contemplating or planning suicide before December 21st.
Really?
I have a friend who is a teacher in Stockton, California, who said that 2 of her students' parents had come to her saying they planned to kill their children and themselves before this happened. I have had several reports of suicides already taking place from people that were depressed and worried. It's anecdotal, I don't know, but I know that almost every teacher I've ever talked to says this is a real fear among their students. And even if only a tiny fraction of those who are thinking about suicide should actually do it, then we have a serious societal problem, and we ought to think about what's the best way to do it. Usually with pseudoscience, we just ignore it. I don't think we can ignore this one.